Welcome back to the Direct Response Podcast. I'm your host, Travis Ketchum, joined here with David Cartolano about the inbox. How's it going, bud?
Hey, I'm good, man.
Yo, so we're here just to hit a real simple question on the head people have sometimes about email, and that is actually about email attachments and sizes. And, you know, do you remember the good old days? I don't know, you're younger than me, but there used to be once upon a time where you couldn't send more than like a megabyte, right? Because your entire inbox was 1 meg in storage. I remember the revelation of, oh my gosh, can you imagine? Google's going to give you a gigabyte of space for free? That is insane, you know?
Yeah.
So things have come a long way. But that being said, there are still limitations on file sizes when it comes to attachments. Varies by mailbox providers. But, I mean, do you ever send attachments anymore these days?
Straight up, no. I do remember my dad using floppy disks and stuff like that in like the early 2000s and the 90s because he was a computer nerd. But nowadays, you know, an attachment, I mean, what's the point? So like using cloud-based storage like Google, if you're a bit of a security and privacy nerd like me, using Proton Drive, using Microsoft's solution. I don't know if it's 365 or Office 365, whatever it's called. I don't
whatever they
use
called
it
it this week, you know.
Yeah, whatever they decide to name it. And there's so many other solutions out there. It's just easier to use one of those links, and there's benefits of doing it as well compared to just like attaching something and making Google and AOL and Yahoo suspicious of your email, saying like, okay, what's in the attachment? What are they sending here? That's suspicious.
Not to mention clogging up the recipient's inbox, because let's also be honest with ourselves. It is rare, especially in a working environment where, you know, there's so many use cases where a document may be updated over time. And then you get this kind of funny version where it's like, you know, client presentation .final, .final.1, .final.2, .final, all it's like, well, which one of these are we even doing? And every time you make just, you know, one period edit to make a different document, because you missed a comma or an apostrophe or something, like you're regenerating the whole thing. And so you're creating a lot of sort of like digital landfill type environment. And that's where those cloud services, you know, iCloud Drive, Google Drive, whatever your, you know, flavor of choice is, there's so many options now to put it in the cloud so that you can then replace it and then they can reference a piece of information.
It's just so much easier.
Yes, but that being said, there are limits, and there are sometimes instances where sending an attachment does make sense. We use this sometimes actually in some of our scarcity stuff, where if people miss the link to the web hosted version, we will send them a copy, but it's usually like a lead magnet that hasn't changed in a couple of years, right? It's very solid, and we're trying to send an individual copy to an individual person, and so there is still a use case to do this sometimes. So with that, let's talk about some of these limits, right? Because depending on your provider, you know, those limits are different. Some of them are more lenient. Some of them are more strict. When we look through the list, which by the way, there's a whole list linked down in the comment section or the description down below, you have like Zoho and Microsoft and Google. Who would you guess is probably one of the more strict file size?
Microsoft. Dude, Microsoft. Oh my gosh, they're Fort Knox of email. So yeah. I didn't even look. I already know.
Well, so Microsoft, you know, they do definitely have limits, but surprisingly enough, you know, Zoho seems to be one of the lowest common denominator. I think because they probably offer their, you know, so many different free options, and so to keep it free, they keep it tight. But the general rule of thumb is, you know, it doesn't matter what your individual client or recipient can handle, because if you send it out repeatedly to different people, you need to know what the lowest one is, right? And so generally speaking, 10 megabytes is kind of the lowest common denominator right now. Some of them allow 25, but 10 seems to be kind of the average lowest one. So when you're creating a document, think about that in mind. If you're anywhere approaching that, you need to immediately start thinking, okay, what are my other solutions? Now, there are sometimes technologies such as, you know, Apple tries to do this sort of like pseudo cloud thing where if you're trying to email someone a big attachment, Apple will say, you know, this user might not understand what they're doing to the recipient here. So we're going to go ahead and just do them a solid, and we're going to actually put that in the cloud. And then we're going to give the recipient a link that they can download at their leisure for the next 30 days or something, right? So it's sort of like a hybrid system where you as the sender think that you're doing an attachment, but really what's happening is it's being put into a temporary cloud repository because of these limits and because of the issues. And that's before we even get to deliverability, which is something we always love to assess about. And, just like a weight loss pro athlete, trying to trim every ounce of fat so they can run their 100-meter dash just a little bit faster. The same is true usually of file sizes, both in the weight of the email itself and attachments, right? Like you talked about being sus. You want to talk about that a little bit more about what doing an attachment does to your deliverability?
Totally. And I would like to apologize to Zoho for my to Microsoft for my implicit bias against them. Just been burned so many times. But yeah, absolutely. So I like to liken sending an email and the filters that Google and Yahoo and AOL and the rest of them use to sort you into spam or promotions or to serve you up to the primary inbox. I like to compare it to the TSA. The more bags you have, the more likely they're going to stop you because they're going to find stuff they don't like. And when you have a giant 10 megabyte file, usually emails, they're a couple of kilobytes. Like they're not these huge things. That's like showing up to the TSA with 20 bags. They're going to be like, "Yo, what are you doing, bro?" So
and a top hat and a fluffy,
oh my
scarf.
God, you have a small one of those small white dogs barking, and they're like, we hear 3 types of barking. There's animals in there, So having that file size will impact deliverability. Because there's just more to scan. There's more to take a look at. And I mean, one of the things that you can do is zip files to make them smaller, but even then it's still a lot. It's still a lot. So it would overall, in my opinion, in my experience, have a negative impact and increase the chances that Google's going to be like, all right, this is weird. We'll put this in spam. We're going to put this in promo, even if you do have a great reputation with them.
Yeah. And you also have to consider, these mailbox providers, they deal with storage at a scale that most of us can't even fathom. Yeah. Right. And so what they're doing is they're looking at, okay, if someone needs to send a file to someone else, we do technically support that protocol. But if you're trying to send a file as an attachment to hundreds or thousands or millions of recipients, that digital waste gets multiplied to a level that is hard to really explain, right? And so when you think about that is why most ESPs like Campaign Refinery or ActiveCampaign or Kit or MailChimp or whatever, when you're adding an image, you're not attaching the image the way you would when you send an email one-to-one. What's really happening is it's rendering an image that is hosted in the cloud, which is a big difference from an attachment, because you want to, again, like that pro fighter, not like Mike Tyson when he's 58 or whatever, like a pro prime shape fighter. You are like cutting every ounce you do not need that does not serve you, and one of the number one ways you can do that is by cutting those attachments. So to recap, attachments bad, cloud good. Sometimes there is a scenario where attachments do make sense. If you do need to do that, do everything you can to thin that baby out, right? So if you're sending a file, maybe don't send the raw, uncompressed version that you took with your fancy DSLR. Maybe send a JPEG that's at 80% of its quality to cut that file size by like 90%, right? Yeah. If you're sending a PDF, make sure you zip it. Like really do all the technologies you can to compress and really streamline the size of that attachment, not only for your benefit so that it gets there, but for the respect and benefit of the recipient so that you aren't clogging up their inbox forever and ever and ever. And that limit being 10 megs and 25 on some, but keep it under 10 for sure.
Yeah. And if you do have a PNG or JPEG and it's an image of an ebook or whatever, you can go to tinypng.com and it will reduce the file size. And it takes a couple seconds and it's totally free. So if you are attaching something, there's no excuse. You can Google it, ChatGPT it. There are plenty of resources out there.
Yeah, and one little sneaky thing I just thought of that people should investigate to make sure they aren't adding too many attachments unknowingly is fancy email signatures. Take a look at your signature. A lot of times that comes across as an attachment with all the images attached to that. There's no reason that a 20 by 20 pixel version of your favorite social media site that you're trying to link out to in your signature should come across as some 300 dots per inch printable quality icon. It should look nice, But you can achieve all these things, again, cutting it down, streamlining it, maybe even evaluate if it needs an image. Maybe it just says, X, Facebook, LinkedIn, and it's just linked. That would be ideal. But take a look at that. Maybe you have a company logo you're required to have or something of that nature. But do your best to cut that baby down. Like your advice, go get it compressed. Everything in the web works better when it's light.
Yep,
Cool.
right on.
Well, I think that should answer your question all about email attachments. If that's what you came here to learn today, we have the blog post down below if you're curious about if your particular mailbox provider, has a particular limit that's of interest. If you want to send emails at scale and you don't want to send attachments like a dummy, go ahead and check out Campaign Refinery. We are really good at getting email into the inbox. And if you want to learn how to grow and scale your newsletter without using attachments,
Oh my God.
check out what David's got going on over at wealthyinbox.news. Catch you guys later.